All right, this has been an interview that I wanted to do for a really long time. And after I interview Seth Maxwell, you'll know exactly why I wanted to do this. But I also had the recent opportunity to introduce him at our Paul Mitchell Owners Summit not too long ago. And I was like, I can't believe I get to introduce him when Claybaugh asked me to. And I was so excited, Seth. And then after listening to you speak, I thought to myself, I've got to get him on the Next Level Salon Leadership podcast. So thank you for being on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be with you.
You're amazing. And you're exactly what our beauty industry needs right now to hear from. Even though you're not in the beauty industry, you're definitely a part of the beauty industry in so many aspects. And the amazing thing about Seth is he actually founded a nonprofit called the Thirst Project, of which our Paul Mitchell schools have been heavily fundraising for. And it's been really incredible to learn, the different things that you're doing, which I'm going to let you talk about as well too today. But what I'm most interested in hearing about is your legacy youth leadership nonprofit that you started 3.5 years ago. And I love how you're training young people, especially students, in leadership skills. And that's so desperately needed. I want to hear about that. But first, I have to hear about this because you're not only, I love how you say you have many hats as a son, a friend, an entrepreneur, an activist, a producer, but an actor and a speaker, of course, which I think a lot of speakers are actors, of course, too. But you got to work alongside Drew Barrymore. So I got to hear about that. What was that like?
Oh, it was amazing. There are a handful of moments, I think, as you go through life where you sort of pinch yourself. You're like, man, how did I end up here? And the story behind the story is there's a movie called Miss You Already, which is a really beautiful, film that came out a handful of years ago. And the director who helmed that project is a really good friend of mine and a supporter of Thirst Project. And so Drew Barrymore and Toni Collette, are best friends in this story. And Tony's character plays a publicist who works in PR for this charity. And so the director came to me and she said, hey, rather than use kind of a fake organization, what if we use this opportunity to raise the profile of what Thirst Project's doing, the water crisis itself, and what if we actually write thirst into the movie? And so I said, yeah, of course, that sounds amazing. And so they, licensed all of our images and logo, and then they recreated essentially like a gala that we would do. And it was so trippy because she then said, hey, would you come play yourself in this movie? And she goes, you won't probably have a ton of time on air, but just tell a little bit of what the water crisis is, tell what Thirst Project's doing, we'll see what we can use in these scenes that they're at. And I was like, yeah, of course. So they flew me to London, and I got to hang out in London for a few days shooting with Drew Barrymore and Toni Collette and Dominic Cooper and all these amazing people. And it was so weird because I walk onto set and I'm dressed in a tuxedo, and I walk onto set into what looks like an event that we would throw. And there's 8-foot tall photos of our work that's blown up and lit really cool, and our logos blown up, and all these tables set like a gala. And then I spent 2 days just hanging out, having conversation. When you shoot a movie or a TV show, it is a painstakingly slow process. So there's a lot of just hanging out, waiting for things to be reset, shots to be set up again, and you're just talking. And so I just literally spent 2 days hanging out around a table, talking to Drew and Toni and Dominic and having a great time. And so yeah, it was really cool. And one of those weird moments where you're like, oh wow, this is wild. So
that's incredible. Congratulations on that. And I love her. And I recently saw her in a home show. I like to watch HGTV home shows. And she was absolutely incredible because that show, it's actually called Celebrity IOU with the Property Brothers. And so it kind of humanizes these celebrities. So I saw a different side of Drew Barrymore that I hadn't seen before. And so when I heard that you had, acted alongside her, I was like, okay, I have to find out what is she like?
Oh, she is so sweet. I mean, there are some times where you'll have an encounter with someone and sort of the persona or image that you've imagined or perceived them to be is just so different than maybe what your experience is. And She was just from start to finish super warm and lovely and like silly, like very goofy. There were lots of laughs, and yeah, it was a really fun experience. And there was a lot of really cool other kind of crossover, like world colliding moments in that, where like, Adam Sandler has become really involved with Thirst Project, and obviously they have a longstanding relationship. And Bella Thorne, who is, one of our earliest supporters, has worked with her really closely on some projects too. And so it was just one of those really beautiful moments where, like, I wasn't there like trying to get famous, trying to make a bunch of money, like be in a movie. I was like, oh, I'm just here to like take advantage of this opportunity and tell our story. And I think it was really cool. It was kind of disarming, and so everyone was super engaging. And everyone's like, oh wow, like you're not an actor, like you're not here to be an actor, like what are you doing, and tell us about this organization. And so it was really great. It was super lovely.
Gosh, that is so awesome. And just kind of watching you from a distance, Seth, as we've been, supporting the Thirst Project. Can you talk a little bit about the Thirst Project and why it's so important for you that
Yeah.
you're involved with that? Or you're the founder. Are you the
Yeah.
primary founder of
Yeah.
Thirst Project?
So Thirst Project has been really kind of, the defining thing in my life for the last 14 years. So I learned about the global water crisis when I was 19. And at that point in time, there were 1.1 billion people in the world who just didn't have access to safe, clean drinking water. Today, that number is about, 663 million. And so what that really practically means is it's not just a big number. It means that every day in developing communities all over the world, women and children will walk really long distances from their homesteads to whatever standing water sources are available. So ponds, rivers, swamps, but open, unprotected sources that are often shared with animals that will drink and defecate in the same water sources that people drink from. And so consequently, people will contract really easily preventable waterborne diseases. So things like diarrhea, dysentery, cholera. And so what happens is we will go into communities and we will build freshwater wells, spring protection systems, rainwater harvesting systems to provide people with access to safe, clean drinking water. And the impact of that doesn't just mean that people aren't thirsty. It means you see disease rates drop consistently by 70, 80%, what feels like almost overnight. Child mortality rates drop by insanely dramatic rates. You see that kids who used to have to spend hours and hours walking long distances to collect dirty water don't have to do that anymore. So they could take that time and go to school, get an education. It means that women who used to have to spend hours walking to get water don't have to anymore. They can take that time and get jobs and contribute financially to their households. So it really does touch and impact every single sector of life. But what we do, right, the end result isn't that unique. There are lots of great water organizations, but what is that while we're certainly not the oldest, we are definitely the largest youth-led water organization. And so what I mean by that is, we work with several 100,000 high school and college students across the world. I mean, there's Thirst Project Indonesia, Thirst Project Portugal, Thirst Project UK, with, sometimes 30, 40, 50 schools in those countries who have either Thirst Project chapters or clubs. We work with about 1,100 campuses, high school and college campuses across the world, who do things like dances, walks, video game tournaments, all to raise awareness of this issue and then money to build real water projects to provide people in need with safe water. And we commit to give 100% of all the money that students and public donors raise to funding water projects. But since we started as a group of, young people ourselves 14 years ago, we've brought about 600,000 people in 13 countries safe, clean water for life, which, that's impressive. But what's really impressive is what the global community has done, right? We're just one small piece of this movement. And I think that it's not just a bunch of young people's naivete or idealism. I really do believe we will see the end of this issue, not just in our lifetimes, in the next maybe 15 or 20 years, because since we started, the number of people in the world without safe water has gone from 1.1 billion to just about not quite 700 million, right? So while the global population has risen, We just crossed 8 billion people in January of this year. The number of people in the world without safe water has been cut by over a third. So we will see the end of this issue in our lifetimes, and push, we will be the generation to push the water crisis into the history books in the same way that our grandparents effectively eradicated polio. It's just a question of, how quickly can we move that ball down the field? And, the Paul Mitchell schools and the entire, honestly, beauty industry has been so incredibly instrumental and supportive, and played, honestly, such a huge role in the work that we've been able to do. Every year the Paul Mitchell schools are so incredibly supportive of the work that we do, but not just giving incredibly large amounts of money, which you do, and is amazing. But I mean, like I said, being the hands and feet of this movement, raising the profile, raising awareness of the work that we do with so many events and fundraisers and campaigns at schools and salons all over the country. So it's been remarkable, and we're so grateful for the partnership.
Yeah, it's huge, because I think this kind of ties into the next subject that I want to talk about, which is your legacy youth leadership nonprofit. But the whole thing is with college students, that I love what you're doing, and even seeing what you're doing with water, because I've been to Africa, I've been to Haiti, I've been to Mexico, so I've seen this crisis firsthand, and it's horrific, and you cannot even believe it, and you almost have to go to see it because you can't believe that people live this way. It's just so awful. And so, but the fact is that giving really is the highest level of living, and it really is like the number one thing as a leader that you need to be. And this is what attracted me to be a Paul Mitchell school owner, because of the giving nature of John Paul and Wynn Claybaugh. And so kind of going through that project. So talk about that, Seth, because how important is it as a leader and an upcoming leader to learn how to give back, and why?
Yeah, I would maybe sort of extrapolate that even a step further, which is, it's absolutely critical as a leader to be a person who is marked by giving and service, right? I think anyone who has written or spoke about any sort of level of leadership will tell you, being a person who leads from a position of service and giving is absolutely one of the biggest, if not the single biggest, DNA differentiator between really effective, successful, and often beloved leaders and those who are not, right? But I would say, not just for leaders, but to be to be a full human, right? Like, it is just better in every category of life to be a person who operates from a space of giving. And what I mean by that is, right, there are so many, sorry, is this editable?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
you're
cool.
good.
I was just
Yeah.
getting a phone call, so that my phone is unfortunately in these cases linked to my computer. So yes. So let me just, sorry, because these people are going to keep pestering. Cool. Sorry about that. Let me pick that back up
No
with
worries.
humanity. So
Yeah. Be a full human is what you
right.
said. Yeah.
Yeah. To be to live a full life as a human, right, and fully experience our humanity, I think the best way to live is to be a person who operates from a space of giving. And there are lots of kind of cliche examples of this, but I think oftentimes cliche things become so because they are true. I love the example of the analogy that in the Middle East, there are sort of two dominant bodies of water that are very well known, obviously, right? You have the Jordan River and you have the Dead Sea. And the biggest differentiators between the Jordan River and the Dead Sea is the Jordan River has an inlet and it has an outlet. So water flows in and water flows out. And if you look, from a biological, ecological perspective, it is a thriving ecosystem. It supports, a teeming amount of life in that space, right? Because it gives and receives, it takes and it gives. The Dead Sea has an inlet but no outlet, and so it receives and it receives, and there's nowhere to sort of expel or give from. And so consequently, it has one of the highest salt contents of any body of water in the world, so much so to the extent that it cannot sustain life. And so it is called the Dead Sea. It literally cannot sustain life. And I think, as cheesy as the metaphor is, like we were not designed to operate from a space of just taking and taking and taking. And so from a small level up to the largest level, I think it's easy to maybe listen to a podcast or some sort of talk like this and say, oh, well, do they think I need to go like start a nonprofit or, volunteer every Saturday of my time? And it's no, but I do think very much like everyone you speak to, everyone who you observe, who has had these kinds of experiences or participated in these kinds of environments will say, yeah, the times I feel the most alive, the times that I am the most connected to my other human people who I'm on this planet with, is in the times when I'm serving and the times when I am, playing a role in that. And so I would say it's absolutely critical for a leader, but I'd say it's not just critical to, be a good leader. I think it's critical just for the condition of our soul as humans, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so big. In fact, students will ask me all the time, how do you stay in the game of being a business owner? And what I'll say to them is some days I wake up not very happy. And so what I do is I look for somebody that I could give to, whether it's monetary or whether it's just time or maybe an encouraging word. And you're right. And all of a sudden my spirits are lifted, my joy comes back, and now I can lead. Now I'm in that space and that mindset, which I want to talk about now, because why did you start this legacy youth leadership nonprofit?
Yeah. So Thirst Project has been around for about 14 years. And probably the biggest DNA differentiator between it and every other water organization in the world is the way we work with students, right? The Thirst Project, we always say, we believe that young people are the most powerful agents for social change in the world. And we believe that. It's not just something that, sounds good as a slogan, but what we found over time as we reached 9, 10, 11 years of operating was we were working with anywhere between 300,000 to 400,000 students a year who were doing incredible, selfless, generous things to raise awareness of this issue and raise money to build these projects. And to be honest, our essentially sole focus in working with these students and young people, not to sound super crude, but was how do we raise as much money from these students as fast as possible so that we can build these water projects, right? It wasn't how do we raise as much money to get rich, but it's like, how do we build as many projects to serve as many people as quickly as possible, which is fine, right? That is in and of itself inherently noble to a degree. But what we found as we looked at the work we were doing with students specifically was we were coaching students to be better fundraisers, which really meant we were coaching them to be better communicators and public speakers. We were teaching them how to be strategic planners, teaching them how to not just plan one-time fundraising events or campaigns, but in doing so, think about, okay, how do I recruit a team? How do I set a goal? How do I identify the skill sets that each of those people on my team have and map them to the roles that I need them to play in this event or this campaign? How do I cast it? And so all these things, right? Strategic planning, goal setting, event planning, fundraising, which is a skill in and of itself, right? All these other soft skills were also being developed completely by accident, right? It wasn't the mission of the organization, but students were developing social emotional skills. And we thought, man, this is all happening completely by accident. That was not the purpose. The purpose of this was just how do we raise as much money as possible. But we found that as we did more and more of this was that this was incredibly needed and also something that was incredibly often underdeveloped in students in high school and college. And as we sort of played out what that might look like if we were to be intentional about trying to design programs to achieve those results, not just to say, hey, how much money can we raise from students, but how can we develop them as leaders in these specific areas with these specific skills? Then we thought, well, man, the application of those skills is super inspiring and encouraging because students could use those skills, yes, in their school and academic careers to become better students and see improved, high school and college retention rates or improved grades and GPAs. But also these were skills students could use in their actual careers professionally beyond to be entrepreneurs, make money, But even more encouraging and inspiring, to go back to something I said earlier, where I said we will see the end of the water crisis, not just in our lifetimes, in maybe 15 years. The water crisis as we know it and define it will end, right? That human water crisis of people, dying from waterborne diseases. It is something that we as a global community are rallied around amongst not just, the United Nations development goals, but so many agencies and governments working to end this. And so we'll see the end of that. But there are also so many issues in our world that are deeply important, right? Whether it is people experiencing homelessness, climate change, gender equality, mental health issues that people grapple with. And so each of these issues need leaders to step up and participate in driving forward the solutions to these challenges. And, I believe the solutions, the leaders who will drive the solutions to the problems that we face today already exist. They're all out there. It is just a question of how quickly we can develop them to be prepared to step into the spaces to solve those problems. And then, can we wrest the power from the hands of the people who currently have it to get to those new leaders to actually step into this next generation of leaders who are going to solve some of this next level problems that we're working on. And so that was really the driver behind us creating Legacy. Was we thought, man, there's almost these two different things that are happening here. On the one hand, we want to see the end of the water crisis, and Thirst Project still exists. It is hyper focused on ending the water crisis. That's its number one goal. It still works with students, but exclusively through that lens, and it will continue to do so. It has its own board and team, and it's doing great. But Legacy was born really to say, hey, not how do we raise money from students, but how do we serve students? How do we develop leaders and build the next generation of leaders who are going to solve the world's biggest problems, who are going to build a better world, a world that truly works for everybody with nothing and no one left out. And as an aside, or sort of an extension of that, what we also found was the students who probably needed that kind of development, those skills, were probably the students that we were working with the least, right? Because the students who had a high capacity to raise lots of money typically came from middle to upper income communities, and oftentimes wasn't even a virtue of the product of the fact that they were necessarily better fundraisers or better skilled, just because they had access to different resources. And we thought, man, the students who really need these opportunities to grow as a leader, to develop these skills, to become better communicators, to become better strategic planners, and apply these skills to solve problems in their communities are really students from lower income communities. And because income and ethnicity is almost always tied together, also communities of color. And so at Legacy, we are predominantly trying to make sure that we also disproportionately provide access to our programs in low income communities who historically haven't had as much access to these kind of opportunities. But I know that I just talked for a really long time, and I know that, I also know that I didn't actually tell you how we do that, right? So it's one thing to kind of say like, oh, we're building this next generation of leaders and we're developing these skills, communication, strategic planning, goal setting, fundraising. But it's like, what does that actually mean? How do we do that? And so there really are right now two primary programs that we have built to accomplish that goal at Legacy. One is our leadership program. One is our speaking program. And when I say program, each one is about 6 weeks long. They are half digital pre-record programming, so video lessons, assignments, content that are housed within a digital platform, but they're also half live sessions where team members, our full-time staff and educators that we have on team take cohorts or groups of students through these 6-week programs. And then on the other side of these programs, as students have developed these skills, they actually take action and apply those skills by going into their communities and leading awareness campaigns, fundraising initiatives, which can support Thirst Project and the water crisis, but also could support, gender equality, climate change, so many other different initiatives. And it also isn't exclusively a fundraising course, right? We really focus on how do we help students use their time, their money, their voice, and their vote to change the outcome of something, an issue that matters. And I think often when I say vote, like right away, people's like red flag goes up and it's like, oh, we're a fiercely apolitical organization. We're not here to say like this party good, this party bad, this platform good, this policy bad. But it's really helping students understand you have a series of resources available to you to, as a leader, step into solving a problem, to change it. Your time, how do you volunteer and give your time? How do you identify the skills that you have that are different than the skills someone else has and match them to the actual needs of a thing in your community? Your money, right? And money isn't just how do I raise or give money. There's so many things. So you can figure out, how do you become a better fundraiser? How do you make conscious choices about what products you do or don't purchase from companies that either exploit communities or degrade environments or don't? How do you actually choose to give your own money versus what you fundraise? There's so many components there, right? Your voice. And when you use your voice, thinking about how do you do so in a way that is persuasive but also ethical? How do you identify the difference between objective and subjective information when you're finding the information you're going to share about the causes you care about or the position you're going to take? And your vote, right? I think a lot of times, especially with young people and high school even, right? We work with a lot of high school students, and I think the concept can be like, oh, that's something that doesn't really apply to me. But like, we all vote every day, right? Group decision making. You're driving in the car and your friends are trying to figure out where you're going to go eat, and half of you say Taco Bell, half of you say pizza. You're voting, you're casting your vote for what you want. And so understanding the ability to use group decision making and vote to actually move an issue that you care about down the field is super important. And so we're really out to try to help young people understand how to do those things, how to use those tools to build the kind of world that we all want to be a part of, a world that works for everybody.
So good. I love that so much. And, kind of to back up a little bit, I love the fact that you're talking about fundraising, how they create soft skills. And every single leader in my company, I can tell you, when they were a student, they were incredible in our fundraising efforts. And so that's part of our curriculum, is we're going to teach you how to fundraise, because you're going to learn skills about what we do in our industry. I don't care what industry you're in, you're going to learn these skills that are necessary to be successful. And it's interesting when I see, because I hire a lot of our graduates, and I see the ones that were involved with fundraising and the ones that weren't. The ones that were are a lot more social, and they build their clientele a lot quicker. And so I want to talk about that, because you were talking about social emotional skills. And I think as a business owner, we can learn from you, Seth, because the mere fact, and I love how much you parallel the Paul Mitchell School world so much, and then things that are near and dear to my heart as well too, because now I've started leadership clubs in our Paul Mitchell schools, because exactly that I saw, they're giving back to the community, but let's also focus on these social emotional skills. And so I even took it a step further in my salons. I spent an hour a month with them and meet with our brand new protege students, right? And so we go over like emotional intelligence, we do assessments, we do personality assessments, and we go over strengths and weaknesses, and what do you want to focus on this month, and how are you going to invest in yourself personally? And so talk to that business owner right now, how important it is to not only give the technical skills portion, because we of course we coach, Sean and I coach salon owners, and many of them are just so focused on the cutting color, everything you do inside of the salon, that they're not focused on these social emotional skills, which we call leadership skills, right? Because they don't have them themselves, so they don't know what to do. So talk to them. What's the next step for the next leader 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, any industry that you are working in, whether it's you own a salon, you are maybe creating a product in the beauty industry, or you work in a completely different industry. The reality is 2023 and beyond, I believe being smart, right? All the things that you described, whether it's cutting skills, coloring skills, we're talking about competency, right? We're talking about, do you have the competency to do the job that you've been hired for? If I hire someone in finance or accounting, I expect they're going to be able to, bring the competent skills to do that job that I may not, be certified in accounting, but that I've hired them to do a specific thing. Those skills are, we kind of talk about in our world at Thirst Project and Legacy, sort of the 3 C's, right? Character, chemistry, and competency. And so competency is, do you have, the minimum skills requirements to do this job? Ideally, not just minimum, but, the skills to do this job, right? And what I would say is in 2023 and beyond, and this is not even new to 2023, I think this is just a reality for leadership, is that having the skills, in fact, I would go further than just minimum competency. I would say, if you walk into a room and you are relying only on being the smartest person in the room, or even the hardest working person in the room, or having the best finance strategy or even marketing strategy, there's an author I love, Patrick Lencioni, who wrote a book called The Advantage. And he says, any of those things, those competency-based skills, the competitive advantage that there is to be gained by relying only on those things is incremental and limited at best in a world where everything changes in a nanosecond, which ours does. And in that world, being smart, being talented, being hardworking, those are requisite starting points. Those are minimums. Those are permission to play, right? I expect those things. That's not what's going to differentiate or set you apart in the field. Now, he would go on to say, in that book, organizational health trumps all of those in business. But I think to sort of take organizational health aside and drill into what we're talking about, I think a lot of the way to achieve that organizational health lies in these other soft skills, right? Lies in being able to build healthy teams, healthy cultures and structures. And so I would say those soft skills that often get dismissed, they are 100% the do or die, make or break elements of what will or will not determine the long-term success of your business. Because simply having a solid finance strategy, or someone who knows the minimum competency of how to cut and color, everyone, right? That's not impressive. That is the starting point. That is the minimum requisite place, permission to play. And so, what I would say is 2023 and beyond, if you yourself or the people who you are hiring don't have those skills, which obviously you can't teach someone that you can't teach someone something that you yourself do not know. It has to become absolute number one priority for you to figure out, how do I develop within myself those skills? And then how do I go about identifying team players who have those skills and bringing them around the table and mapping them to the appropriate seat on the bus that they should be in. And so, for us, I always say, I can teach competency. I myself may not be able to teach, competency in finance, or if I can find people who, can teach skills, it is much harder to find those first 2 C's, character and chemistry, right? And chemistry, we're talking about, I think within that C is what is housed all of those other soft skills, those social skills, those things that you're talking about. But at the end of the day, they will be absolutely the make or break, sort of do or die differentiator for your business.
Yeah, 1000%. I love that. And yeah, kind of talking about the competency, let's talk about that first and foremost, because I think that even falls into character, because I was thinking about some of the issues that a lot of our salon owners are facing. And that is, they're recruiting new talent, but the new talent doesn't even show up to the hiring event, or doesn't even show up to the interview. Just showing up matters, and don't make an appointment with somebody that you're not going to keep as well too. So let's kind of talk about that. Let's start at the basics here, talk to that future leader, so to speak, and our future professionals in the Paul Mitchell school world, or any of the cosmetology schools. What advice would you give to them about showing up, the importance of showing up?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand the question. If you mean for me to talk to the owners or the people who are struggling to get a job versus the person who wants to show up. But what I would say on, first, right? Those current leaders, those current salon owners, school owners, et cetera, who may be struggling with getting people to show up, you may not like my answer, but the reality is we can gather at leadership conferences. We can listen to podcasts and seek advice from people who are in positions of leadership and go, oh, isn't it so hard to be a leader these days? People just don't want to show up. People just don't want to. And at the end of the day, that sort of commiserating doesn't get you anywhere. You might as well just go spit in the wind, right? So the reality is it's freaking hard right now, right? And so let's peel back the curtain and go, okay, well, why is it hard? What is the landscape that we are competing in? And what is the environment that this pool of talent, this pool of people who we are hiring and not showing up or recruiting from are a part of? And the reality is we live in a world of nearly endless, limitless options and possibilities, right? And so the challenge for you as a leader is, okay, you want to be a dynamic leader. You want to build a big, beautiful, inspiring business that hopefully has some sort of driver other than just making you money, which making money is important and worthwhile and, to a degree noble, and that it helps you take care of your family and be a part of your community. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I would push back on leaders and go, so what is it that you are doing or should be doing as a leader to incent people or inspire people to want to show up, right? Now, at the end of the day, this goes back to the first C, right? Which is absolutely, there's a reason it's the first one. It's character. I can't teach character. I mean, you can to children, and absolutely we need parents and teachers who are engaged in being active roles, playing an active role in building people to have good character. But as an adult, I, as a leader, don't want to figure out how to teach character to the team members I hire. And so there's a reason that's sort of the first thing you look for. And if you have done a great job of building an organization that is inspiring, that has a purpose other than just, hey, I'm the boss and owner and I want to make a lot of money, so you should show up because I'm going to pay you. That's not a very inspiring story, candidly, right? And so, and I think, we can complain and be like, oh, well, nowadays as a salon owner, I have to think about how to have an inspiring mission and have to have a purpose to tie people to show up to work to, other than, isn't it just purpose enough that I'm paying you and you can go pay your bills? And let's say, well, tell me how that works out for you. I don't know. At the end of the day, you can complain about it or you can adjust, and either your business will succeed or it will fail based off how you do or don't respond to the current climate. And the reality of the current climate is, in a world with nearly endless options, you have to look at the tools that you have available to you as a leader to build the kind of environment people want to participate in and incent people to participate. And you may not be able to endlessly increase compensation to use that as the incentive to recruit people. So to the extent that you've reached that cap, what is the story? What is the bigger story, the bigger purpose that people get to be a part of by being a employee or a team member at your salon and your organization than they do anywhere else? And I can't answer that for you. Only you can, right? And it may not be something that is, so missional as, well, we only cut hair for people experiencing homelessness, and that's why it's like a really beautiful big story that is inspiring. That's great, and it would be amazing if that was the case, but in most cases that's not going to be the situation, right? And so I think for you have to figure out what is that organizational differentiator that is culturally what your team gets to experience, what is different about being a part of that team, maybe not even what you do that's different or what the mission is different, but what it is that you get to be a part of in this culture. How are you providing for that team in a way that is supportive and not exploitative, right? Whether it's with compensation, benefits, what is it that is missional from a story perspective? And then also you as a leader, right? If you lack the soft skills to be a person who is enjoyable to be around, who invests in the development of the people you are with, it's going to be real hard, I imagine, to recruit people. Now that doesn't mean that all of them, you may be able to check all those boxes. You may have a clear and compelling purpose beyond just making money. That's a story that everyone wants to be a part of. You may have a healthy culture that is really great, that the people want to be in that environment. You yourself may be lovely and engaging and invest in your people, and you may take good care of them and compensate well and provide well and be understanding. And still you may recruit someone who doesn't show up. And that's where it goes back to the first C, and you go, okay, great. Well, they don't have the character that I want on the bus, But it isn't just that we live in a world today where there is no one with character. That's just not the reality. And so the question becomes, okay, how do I do all the things that are on me as a leader to make sure that I've at least created the environment so that when I identify and recruit those people who are the people that I want on the bus, they show up and they stay. And the ones who don't show up weren't supposed to be there in the first place. But at the end of the day, I think we have to answer those first 4 questions, right? What is the mission? What is the purpose? What is the story? And it can be a mission which is just, maybe we're way more expensive than every other salon, but we create something, an experience and a product that is so beautiful, literally, in the beauty industry, that when people leave, there's a reason why we charge 5 times what our competitors charge. And everyone who can afford it and who is a client here leaves just astonished. And the environment we have created and the experience we've created for them is so magical, is so special, that it's like excellence is what we're doing. In a world where people struggle with mediocrity, that is not who we are. And we don't just use the word excellence in the way that people like slap it on a vision board. It is something that it is notably different. You know the difference between when you go to a restaurant and you pay a lot of money for something that's like, it was like pretty substandard, versus, wow, the care that every person from the bussers to the servers to the chefs took in creating this environment, and this food I experienced was so next level, not to play off of the name of your podcast, but so next level that it's like, this was excellence, versus, that's just kind of a word we throw around and say. The difference, right? Maybe that is your mission. Maybe that is the story you're telling. Or maybe it's, we're serving a need. We are so much more affordable than our competitors, and we have incredible quality and care that gets provided to these people, but it still is enough to where we provide really good compensation and support for our team members. We serve a role in this community that's a safe space for people who are struggling to come and leave feeling beautiful and cared for. Whatever that purpose is beyond just making money, what is that? Get really clear about it. Number 2, you as the leader, how are you developing those soft skills to be the person that people want to interact with in a way that's going to retain those people, and not just retain them, but to where you are able to invest in developing your people in that way? Number 3, how are you actually taking care of those people? Is your compensation fair, competitive, or is it exploitative? Are your benefits and opportunities that you create for them and the way you invest in them meaningful? And I think answering those questions, if you take care of all of those things, culture, I always say, culture self-selects. Culture will spit you out. So, if you create a culture where you accept only a certain level of participation, and I don't necessarily mean that you're hard and demanding. It might be like, I am relentlessly authentic with who I am and how I share myself, which can feel really scary and icky for somebody who has built a life where they only allow people to see the performative, varnished version of themselves. And so if I don't accept that and I don't share that, people either will naturally gravitate away because they don't want to be called, they don't want that called out of them. And so culture self-selects. As you build that culture, the people who are supposed to be there will show up. But I would posit that if you're struggling to get anyone at all, it's probably not that we just live in a world where no one wants to work and no one has character and no one, I would say, let's figure out, maybe it's not the world we used to be a part of. Maybe it's not that you can just demand, because I went to the effort of incorporating a business and building a salon and put my name on it and I'm offering a paycheck, someone's just going to do what I tell them to do. The days of those world are probably gone. So you can quit, go do something else. You can mourn the loss, or you can adapt.
Yeah. 1000%. And what are some of the ways that you would, if you were to talk to a business owner or a salon owner right now, and I 1000% agree, because I talk about this all the time. Chick-fil-A has a waiting list of people to work for them. Okay. And yet I don't. And so what am I doing wrong? How do I need to fix my leadership so that I can be attractive to that next generation to want to work, in our companies? And so talk to that leader, like, how should they invest in themselves? Because again, the hardest person to lead is you, right? And so, but you gotta lift that leadership lid. So how do you, Seth, lift your leadership lid? Like, we run a lot of leadership masterminds. We go through a lot of books. We do a lot of podcasts together, things like that. What do you do to grow your leadership lid? And what do you recommend to business owners?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I have literally they know. I have what I call my life board. This is separate from my organizations, each of which have actual board of directors, where people have been asked to bring their skills, their competencies, their networks, their wealth, their wisdom to those organizations, and they not only bring those resources and skills, but they get to have purview over and direction over those organizations. They vote quite literally on financial decisions, program direction, et cetera. I then built what I, as a nerd, refer to as my life board, right? It's 5 people and they're all very different. They're not all just, incredible business leaders, although a couple of them are, right? A couple of them are incredible founders or CEOs who have one of them's built a $150 million business, right? And it's someone who I'm like, man, professionally, like you have achieved things that I want to achieve. Some of them though, like one of them is my former youth pastor, and now he's the executive pastor of a church in Ohio. And so he, and I'm not saying anything that I think would offend him, he may not have built a multi-million dollar business, but man, there are few people that when I think about, as I observe their marriage, as I observe the way that they parent and interact with their kids, as I observe the kind of friend that they are, I'm like, oh, I want that. I want to be that for the people who are most important in my life, right? And so that person holds a seat on my life board, and I've between finance, business, faith, personality, relationships, I have assembled this group of people who I'm like, yo, I quite frankly look up to you. You are doing the things I want to be, right? And so I have given them sort of unprecedented access to my life, right? My finances, how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, where it's going, what my financial goals are, where I'm at in my intimate or romantic relationship or relationships, given on dating time, what my goals are with family, my goals with friends, my health. And we have board meetings, and literally I report to them on these key aspects of my life, and I seek guidance and direction. And so I think, for you as a leader, I would ask, who is it that you look up to? Who has accomplished the things that you want to accomplish? And I think it's easy a lot of times to just, when I say that, think, oh, well, that means financially, right? Who has built the biggest business? But scale and money is really just one aspect of business, leadership, and life, right? And so, yeah, that it's important. It is a driver. It's fuel for a lot of things. But I would say, who are those people, and be really intentional about bringing them around you. You may not have to necessarily go so as in depth or as nerdy as I have been about, like, hey, I want to build this board, but figure out people from whom you can learn and invite them into the spaces, or ask of them to pour into you. It also can be scary a lot of times, like ask someone, I think, to be like a mentor for you. So sometimes start small, right? Be as low lift as possible. When you find those people who you want to be that for you, a lot of times I'll be like, hey, offer something to them before you ask of them, right? I remember early on with some of these relationships, before I had an established friendship or rapport with these people, I would be like, man, I know they're hit up all the time for this kind of thing. And so I would say, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time? Just one 30-minute interview or meeting. I would caveat it and say, I'm going to show up with very specific, clear questions. So they know it's not a waste of your time. I have very clear, specific things I want to ask that I want to learn from you. And I'm going to buy you lunch. I'm going to buy you dinner. I have offered to invest in their time. I'm being very specific about using it. And here's the thing. If you ask someone for advice versus starting out with like, hey, will you be my mentor? Or hey, will you be on my board? A, it's a lower lift. It's less scary. B, everyone loves giving advice and loves hearing themselves talk. And then C, once you have gotten advice from someone, they feel invested in you, because presumably if you succeed or fail, it will be because you applied the advice that they gave you. So they have a much stronger vested interest in seeing you succeed and doing more with you down the line. So start small, right? But first and foremost, who are you reaching out to? Who has access to and who have you invited in to speak into your life and your business? Number two, though, there's so many resources, right? We live, my God, like the
Hello.
time in human history that we are alive in is unreal. We are literally on a leadership podcast right now, and I am by no means the biggest expert in the world, not even close, right? So like, there are, I think Brene Brown talks about a lot of times. She's like, I have people who are mentors of mine who do not know that they're mentors of mine, right? Because they're people who have poured their hard-won wisdom into books, into talks that I can go watch, into podcasts. And so I can get access to that opportunity, those experiences, without having to go through the painful experience of living them out, learn those lessons, and hopefully apply them. I think Bill Hybels is a guy who used to always say, like, leaders are readers, right? If you are not reading books to help develop you, if you're not watching podcasts or talks like this, you're probably not growing.
Yeah, 1000%. And that's exactly why I started these podcasts, so that I could get people like you in front of me and interview you, but add value to you by getting this out to anybody and everybody, so they have access to you now, Seth, which is huge. And I'm surprised by the amount of my students and staff who don't invite me to coffee. I mean, I love coffee, and it's like, you know what, just a cup of coffee and I'll sit there with you for 30 minutes for sure. And you'd be surprised, and just having the guts. I like how you call it courageous leadership. And gosh, I wish we could go for 8 hours, because this is so good. And you speak on courageous leadership. So what else do you think the future up and coming leader? So we a little bit, we kind of touched on what should a future professional be thinking about in character development as well too, while they're in school, because we have so many students that end up either dropping or getting dropped from the program, which is so sad, because you hear their heart and their soul of how much they want to do this career, but yet their actions aren't lining up from that. And so I think sometimes they just focus too much on the technical and not on all those soft skills too, character development and things like that as well too. So can you kind of talk about that, Seth? Like, what advice would you give a student in college or in cosmetology school?
Yeah. Well, my first response I want to say is I want to speak from a place of empathy, which is, I think I imagine 9 times out of 10, if a future professional, if a student, drops for whatever, any number of reasons you may need to drop, right? You didn't start the program thinking, oh, I'm going to start this and do it for a month and then drop out, right? So it's as much as there may be the instinct to go, oh man, they just didn't have what it takes, or they didn't stick it out or whatever. I want to speak from a place of empathy first, is like, you probably didn't take out this loan, spend all this money, invest this amount of time thinking you were going to drop. So man, like that's so hard, right? That sucks. Whatever the reason was that caused you to have to do that or feel like you had to do that, I'm super sorry. And I think what I will say is, as the next part of the conversation from that, is the reality is, and this has been really huge for me just in life, in the last couple of years. I think for me, I grew up right in the 90s, early 2000s in America, in Indiana. Whether the culprit for this was my parents, who are amazing, by the way, and I couldn't adore more, but nonetheless, whether the culprit of this was my parents, whether it was my faith community, whether it was just culture, right? What school and the world kind of taught me life was going to look like, or was supposed to be. I think an easy culprit to point to might be Disney movies and the expectations that they set. But I think I grew up with an idea that life was going to be, I put this input in, right? I do this thing and I'm going to get this result. So if I show up and I work hard and I study and I get good grades and I go to school, then I will get this result. And sometimes that is how it works. But I think with the other sort of unspoken expectation that was set for me was that, if I do those things and if I put this input in, I'm going to get this output, and the output in general, if I'm doing good things, is going to be good, right? Life is going to be pretty positive, and there may sometimes be difficulty or hardship or tragedy or suffering that sort of, along that timeline every so often, like, disrupt it. But then I'd go back to that kind of stable space. And I know what I'm about to say may sound negative, and I actually don't mean for it to. I actually really mean, if you can bear with me, for it to be a positive. But what I've come to realize, I think, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, is that there will always be suffering. There will always be struggle and hardship and tragedy, right? I'm getting to the age now where I've had, more and more friends begin to pass away. Some of them tragically early, some of them older. I'm getting to the age where I've more and more friends who have lost jobs, lost businesses, had divorces, have all these things, got sicknesses. And so what's interesting is I found, man, there will always be suffering. There will always be a challenge. And I think I used to think that life would be disrupted by challenges, and then you would get back to that sort of steady, stable state. And I think what I have found is I used to say 2-3 years ago, man, I just got to get through whatever the thing was. I just got to get through this big fundraising challenge that's really plaguing me right now. I just got to get through this like hiring struggle I'm in right now. Or I just got to get through this relationship challenge with my family, or this health issue, or whatever it was. And I would get through it, and there was a new thing. And what I found was, man, I was assigning my peace, my joy, my happiness, my sort of steady operating state to the other side of whatever the thing was. And the problem with that was I never got to the stable, steady state, because then something else happened. And so I realized, man, the challenge for me is not how do I enjoy life, or how do I figure out how to operate within life in the absence of those struggles, but rather how do I cultivate my peace, my joy, the habits I want to be able to stay in school or build the kind of life and career I want. How do I cultivate those things in the midst of, not in the absence of struggle? And so what I'd say is, I think we have to start the story where the story starts, which is, man, that sucks. Like, it's really hard if you find yourself in a place where you feel like you need to drop, or you find yourself in a place where you're like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stick this out, right? Finances are too tight. It's not bringing in the money I need yet. I don't know if I can stick with it. I've got these extenuating circumstances with my health, or I have a child maybe that I'm trying to raise, and the schedule's not working out, or whatever it is. And what I can tell you is there will always be a thing. Right. Now, that is not in any way to dismiss the weight or the struggle or the difficulty of that. I see you, and it's hard and it's real. And I can tell you it will always be hard and real, which can seem negative. And what I don't mean for it to be is negative. What I mean for it to be, if you can figure out how to cultivate that joy, that peace, that stability for yourself. And I think, if you haven't read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, oh my God, change your life. But the reality is, like, I can predict, John Maxwell says, and he doesn't just have a great last name, I can predict the long-term outcome of your success if you show me your daily habits, your systems, your habits, the process you create in the midst of your chaotic world will be more likely to determine your success than the goals that you set for yourself. And so I would encourage you to think through, what are those systems that I need to establish to reach the goals that I want. So often we focus, again, James Clear says, on the goal. And the reality is everyone has the same goals, right? Not everyone has the same goal, but I may not want to be an NFL champion. I may not, but every sports team wants to win the championship. Nobody's like, I hope we get fifth, right? Every business owner wants to make money. Nobody's like, I hope that we lose money year over year. We all have similar goals. No one's like, I hope I get less healthy this year and gain a lot more weight and whatever. Like, everyone has the same goals, and yet we experience vastly different outcomes, because goals do not determine success. Systems, habits determine success. And so what I would say is, number one, the realization that, as negative as it sounds, I actually hope you see the silver lining, which is we need to adjust our expectation, which is life will always have challenge and struggle. And so in the midst of those things, how do I cultivate both my peace, my joy, my happiness, but also the systems that I need in the midst of that, versus waiting till I'm on the other side of those things, because you will never be on the other side of them, which can either really discourage you or encourage you to then think, well, the solution is to cultivate those things in the midst of it.
Something that's been heavy on my heart is one of the last questions that I want to ask you is, how, as a business owner, how can you coach some of your team members to not make decisions when their emotions are high? And, it's interesting. One of my coaches said to me, he said, Tina, make sure your staff doesn't make any heavy decisions in January or February in the state of Michigan, because there's like a loom of no sun, right, for those 2 months. And it's very cold, of course. And so make sure that because it's a real thing, like this mental health,
Oh yeah.
issue that's going on, right? Talk about that, like when someone's emotions are high. I was just coaching one of my team members recently, and I said, let's not make a decision today. Let's sit on this for a little bit. How about if you just take a break right now, a mental break, and let's break, and then we'll come back to this. But let's keep, talking about it. Let's do some check-ins, but let's not make a real decision until February's over.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, my thought is there's a lot of wisdom in that. My thought is, I think maybe what is at the heart of that idea or that sentiment is knowing yourself, right? So I think so often, and I think this is not a Seth original thought, and there's lots of, you can go read lots of really wise people, much wiser than me, who have talked about this. I think we also live in a world where there's just so much content that we can consume at any time, so many activities we can participate in. People talk about FOMO, but the reality is that we also now have the JOMO, right? Because there's just we're so burned out, I think, by the limitless number of things that we can read, watch, do. And I think so often what that has created is an environment where we don't spend time with ourselves, right? And so I think you need to first, I think the heart of what you're getting at is know yourself. Am I the kind of person who makes my best decisions when I am feeling a big feeling some kind of way? Whether that feeling is anger, sadness, fear, right? And also, by the way, fear is never a good motivator, right? I don't make my best decisions when they're motivated out of a fear of dying. I make my best decisions when they are motivated out of a commitment to living. And so I would say, know yourself as you are in whatever difficult situation you're in, and you're faced with the challenge of, I need to make a choice. And if I'm feeling some kind of way, do I have the ability to stop, self-regulate, and process and make that choice? Or do I need to step away for a while? So I think taking it even back further, right? Get to know yourself, spend time with yourself, and then build in the tools in your toolbox to say, hey, let's put a pin in this. Let's circle back to this later, right? Sometimes you don't always have the luxury of being able to do that. You may not be the boss. You may not, whatever, you may be forced to make a decision right then. But to the extent that you can, I would say figure out how to know yourself, identify, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What am I thinking? And then, I feel like I just keep quoting other much smarter people than me, but there's a great book called The Best Question Ever. And the best question ever is, hey, in light of my past experiences, my present circumstances, my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? And so not only do you ask those questions of like, hey, like, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? But also, as I'm considering making whatever decision I need to make, in light of my past experiences, my present circumstances, my future hopes and dreams, what is the best choice to make here? And so I think there's a lot of wisdom there. I think absolutely, be able to push pause.
Yeah, take a pause.
I think also, being able to just, I think so often we struggle to like honestly say what we think and feel. Ryan Holiday, I love, he has a video he posted and reposted recently where he says, don't say yes when what you really want to say is no. Like, don't say maybe when what you really want to say, if you had your choice, if you could say what you really want to say, would be no, right? Because the cost of saying yes or maybe when you want to say no is your life, right? It's your time. And so, be careful as you weigh those decisions. Know yourself, understand why and what you're feeling. And then if you need to take a pause, take a pause. And then when you're ready to come back, use the tools you have in your toolbox to actually say what you want, actually say what you feel, and make the decision that is going to be the best decision in light of your past experiences, your present circumstances, and your future hopes and dreams.
Yeah. And I love that. And one of the last questions that I want to ask is, as a leader, so if you are coaching a team member and you're noticing this, how do you coach a team member or a leader, I should say, of an entrepreneur, how to not take it personal? Because that's one of the biggest things that I keep seeing over and over, and why most salon owners hire us, because they are taking it personal, right, from their team members, and they're offended and they get angry and all the things, right? And so how does a entrepreneur work on that?
That's a good question. I think the hard part, to speak specifically to what you do, right? Let's say someone who does work in the beauty industry, maybe not as a salon owner, but I mean, I say this a lot when I'm speaking at elementary schools or other beauty schools or just to the beauty industry. I'm like, man, what you guys do, yes, it is art, but it's almost, you know, I would say higher than art, because people have to live their lives in it, right? People live their lives in the things that you create. And so it's hard not to feel like there is a great deal of you personally invest in that, because it is your ideas, your creativity, your creation that people are living in. And so I think any kind of profession where you are sort of pouring out of yourself, your creativity, your heart, things that are, it's, you're not sitting behind a desk, calculating numbers as an accountant, right? Which there are people who are deeply passionate about accounting, and we need them in the world. But that is not what you do, right? Anytime there is creativity and emotion and heart and ideas on the line, it's hard not to feel like you are personally attached to that outcome. So sometimes I would say, in the same way that you wouldn't want to stifle someone's creativity and actually, or the degree that they feel personally invested in what they're creating, maybe give yourself a little bit of grace and say, hey, yeah, feel these feelings, but also, well, my feelings are liars a lot of the time, right? Like how many times have you, when you look back on your life and like recounted a situation that was like emotionally charged, been like, oh yeah, like what I felt in that moment didn't actually serve me, or it wasn't actually real. My feelings are liars so many times, right? That doesn't mean that they aren't valid. They feel very real to me in that moment. That doesn't mean that they serve me. So sure, feel your feelings 100%. Like, far be it from me to tell you not to feel that way. But then once you have felt it and sat in that feeling for however long you need to sit in it, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, where it's like, okay, well, you're frustrated that people aren't showing up. Okay, great. You can get together and complain about it with your other business owners who are losing talent and losing money over time and be like, the world is just hard right now and people suck. Or you can adapt. And so feel the feeling and then ask, is it serving me? Right? Okay, great. It's not serving me. Let's put that aside now and let's deal and engage with the reality of the situation and what I can practically do to meet that moment that we're currently living in.
Yeah, I love that. And for me, a lot of times exactly that, as step back and think, okay, put yourself in their shoes of where they're feeling and where they're at. Why are you taking it so personal? Because it's not about you, Tina, it's about them. So as a leader, you've got to be able to make that shift. So last question, I promise. Thank you, Seth, for being on this. But first, before I ask the last question, how can people find you, and what are you working on and towards that you think people could be involved with?
Yeah, I'm super easy to find. My Instagram, Twitter, it's all at Seth Maxwell 1, or can find me on sethmaxwell.net. But personally, I'm really excited about what we're building at Legacy. I think all you have to do is scroll through Instagram for 2 minutes or watch 2 minutes of, God forbid, any news network. I'm not saying
I know.
to just realize like the world is inundated with challenges, and it's easy to feel discouraged. But what I am super encouraged about and hopeful about, which like in this day and age, I believe hope itself is an act of rebellion, is that I believe the leaders who will solve the problems that we face today already exist. Like I said, it is just a matter of, can we equip them and put them in the positions that they need to be able to do so. And so I'm really encouraged by what we're building at Legacy, right? We're launching a new program later this fall that I think is going to be super game changing for the students and communities that are in our programs. I'm just really excited about young people, right? Like I am very much an old person now, right? Like look, all you have to do is talk to like any of the students in our program to be like, I thought I was young. I am not young. But the kids are all right.
That's amazing. I love that you said that because I was getting interviewed by this new company that I'm working with on a speaking project. And she asked me, what is your favorite thing to do? And I said, being in front of my students and speaking to them and speaking life into them. That's it. And I have to be around young people. It keeps me young as well. And they keep me young from the inside out, really. But my last question is, what do you think that at 2023 and beyond, that the leader needs to do to go to their next level in their leadership? What's your last piece of advice that you want to give everybody before we go today?
Oh man. I feel like this could be a whole hour. When I talked at the ELT group that you guys had me at for Paul Mitchell back in the fall, we talked about understanding the moment that we're living in, right? And knowing that we are living in completely uncharted leadership territory these days. And that can be really scary, but it can also be really encouraging, which means we get to build something completely new. And so what I would say is, you have got to be aware that there is no return. I think so much I've been in, conferences and Zooms and meetings and people with so many different organizations and leaders who are like, oh, we just got to get back to whatever. I'm like, you are never going back. The world is never going back. There are things that will be similar and reminiscent, but there is no return, which in so many ways is great, right? In so many ways, it's like, oh my gosh, this gives me the environment in which to be more efficient, more financially reasonable, to give more freedom to people, to test and build things that couldn't have otherwise worked in the world that we lived in 3 years ago. It also means there's not a leader alive today who has led in this exact moment before. So, it can be scary, but it also can be really encouraging. And so I'd say, to the extent that you listen, right? Listen to your customers, listen to your team, and understand what they're experiencing, to the extent that you are willing to be nimble and change things. Probably I have a handful of phrases that I'm sure annoy the hell out of our team because I say them so often. But I'll be like, hey, very little is sacred. Very little at Legacy, very little at Thirst Project is sacred. What we do, the mission is sacred, but how we do it, almost none of it is sacred. You could tell I love and believe very much in the programs we've built. We might totally throw them away in a year if we find that there is a different way, a new way, a better way. And I think that's what's required, right? And so I would say, the extent that you are aware that we are living in completely uncharted territory, to the extent that you listen to your own self, to your body, what if you need to take a break to figure out how to best navigate this moment that we're living in, to the extent that you listen to your team and figure out what their needs are in this moment, right? We've all experienced trauma over the last 3 years, right? And so be aware of that in yourself. How do you take care of yourself? Be aware of that in your team. How do you take care of that in your team? And then be aware of this completely new environment and where we're going, and figure out how to listen to the reality of where we are, not what you want it to be, not what it used to be, but what it is, and solve for the reality we are in.
Perfectly said. I think you're my brother from another mother, because this is what I've been saying for a long time. So thank you, Seth. And thank you for letting me go over time today too.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye-bye, Seth.
Bye, friend.